You don't lose to the market. You lose to the voices in your head, the ones that sound exactly like logic. Control. Ego. Hope. Fear. 7 mind killers dressed as reason. They don't take your money. They take your awareness. The moment you see them, you stop trading the chart, and start trading your mind. The market doesn't speak. It reflects. Every tick, every candle, every pullback, just your mind, projected on a screen. You think you're here to make money. But money was never the test. The real exam begins when you stare into the chart and meet the part of yourself that you keep avoiding. It's not your strategy that fails you. It's the voices you've mistaken for logic, whispering things that sound intelligent, but are only echoes of fear dressed as reason. They convince you to wait when you should act. To act when you should watch. To believe you're in control when you're already being controlled. The market isn't chaos. It's a mirror. A perfect, merciless mirror. It doesn't care about your plans, your confidence, your potential. It only shows you what's still unresolved inside. That's why trading feels personal. Because it is. Every decision carries the fingerprint of your emotions. Every loss traces back to something older than the trade, an ancient need for certainty. Some call it instinct. Some call it bias. But they all come from the same source, the mind trying not to die. And yet, this is where every trader falls. Not because the market is cruel, but because we never learned how to see ourselves clearly. There are 7 forces that destroy traders from within. They don't scream. They whisper. And by the time you notice their presence, they've already rewritten your truth. These are the 7 trading mind killers, and they don't attack your account. They attack your awareness. You want to win. You tell yourself it's about precision, about discipline. But what you really want is control, over chaos, over outcome, over the part of you that still doubts. And that's where it begins, the silent war inside your own head. The market destroys traders. Their minds do. One thought, one hesitation, one illusion at a time. We call them emotions, patterns, habits, but there's something deeper, fragments of identity clinging to survival. Each convinced it's keeping you safe, each secretly draining your clarity. Control tells you to predict. Ego tells you to prove. Hope tells you to wait. Fear tells you to run. Greed tells you to double down. Doubt tells you to freeze. And despair. Despair tells you it's pointless to even try. These are the 7 killers. Not demons, not mistakes, reflections. Every time you listen to them, you feed the illusion that safety comes from understanding. That certainty can be earned through effort. But the truth is brutal, the market doesn't reward control. It rewards composure. What you call chaos is just reality, stripped of your expectations. You think you can outsmart it, by backtesting, optimizing, tightening risk. But what you're really doing is negotiating with fear. Because deep down, you don't trade the market. You trade your state of mind. Every chart is a reflection. Every loss a confession. There's a reason every trader breaks the same way, and it's not lack of skill, it's the mind refusing to let go of illusion. So before we meet the killers, remember this, they're not separate from you. They are you, dressed in thoughts that sound like reason. And they're quiet. That's what makes them deadly. 1. Control. It starts with the illusion of safety. The comfort of believing that if you can just plan enough, analyze enough, predict enough, the chaos will submit. Control seduces through logic. It whispers in spreadsheets, in setups, in perfectly drawn zones. It makes you feel powerful, right before it makes you fragile. Because control isn't strength. It's fear pretending to be order. The trader who needs control is the trader who can't breathe in uncertainty. Every candle becomes a threat, every deviation a personal attack. You don't trade anymore, you defend. The market moves, and your mind tightens. You add indicators, reduce risk, seek validation. But all you're really doing is building walls around a storm. Control doesn't prevent chaos. It delays it. And when it finally breaks, the collapse feels like betrayal. You think the market changed. It didn't. You did, from presence to panic. True mastery begins where control ends. The moment you stop needing certainty, you finally start to see. 2. Ego. Ego is the mask that turns trading into identity. It's the voice that says I was right instead of I learned. You don't protect capital anymore, you protect your image. The chart becomes a mirror, and every red candle feels like an insult. You chase validation disguised as confidence. You double down, not because it's wise, but because you can't stand being wrong. Ego doesn't trade for profit, it trades for self-worth. That's why losses sting long after they're closed. You weren't losing money, you were losing identity. But here's the truth, the market doesn't care who you are. And that's the freedom you've been avoiding. When ego dies, awareness appears. 3. Hope. Hope is the most polite form of denial. It sounds harmless, even noble. It'll turn around. Just one more candle. The setup is still valid. Hope hides behind optimism. But what it really protects is attachment. You're not hoping for profit, you're hoping not to face the truth. Every trader knows that moment, the small loss that could have been nothing, but turns into something that changes your mood, your day, your life. That's hope, clinging to illusion to avoid pain. The market rewards detachment, not belief. Hope delays awareness. It turns clear exits into emotional negotiations. And the longer you stay, the more you lose, not money, but honesty. True awareness begins when you no longer need the market to make you feel safe. 4. Fear. Fear isn't the enemy. It's the shadow of attachment. You fear losing what you think you control. You fear missing what you think you deserve. You fear chaos because it exposes how fragile your certainty really is. Every hesitation, every overanalysis, every what if, that's fear wearing the mask of caution. You don't call it fear. You call it discipline. But fear hides in that discipline, shaping it, freezing it, turning it into paralysis. You wait for the perfect setup, the perfect alignment, the perfect confirmation. But the market doesn't wait. Fear is expensive. Not because it makes you lose, but because it keeps you from acting when it's time to win. You can't eliminate fear. You can only see through it. 5. Greed. Greed begins as excitement and ends as addiction. It's the moment you stop trading the market and start trading the rush. The profit isn't enough. You need to feel something. To be alive. To chase the high of winning, the illusion of control returning. But greed doesn't want profit. It wants escape. Escape from the emptiness between trades. You overtrade not because you're confident, but because silence feels unbearable. Greed feeds the loop, euphoria, regret, exhaustion, repeat. And the cruel truth? The market always knows when you're desperate. Because greed leaves a scent, urgency. And urgency is the opposite of awareness. 6. Doubt. Doubt is the slow erosion of trust. It doesn't scream. It dissolves. One losing streak, one missed entry, one moment of hesitation, and suddenly every move feels wrong. You lose faith in your process, your instincts, your edge. You start searching, new systems, new gurus, new confirmations. But doubt doesn't want solutions. It wants distraction. Because distraction feels safer than stillness. The truth is, you can't trade clarity when your self-trust is gone. You're not analyzing the chart anymore, you're begging for certainty. And certainty doesn't exist. Doubt dies the moment you stop asking for answers. When you trade from awareness, not assurance. 7. Despair. Despair is the quietest killer. It doesn't break you suddenly. It empties you slowly, trade after trade, expectation after expectation. You start losing interest in charts, in setups, in learning. The fire that once drove you now burns as ash. This is where most traders quit, not because they failed, but because they lost connection to why they started. Despair is the death of meaning. When trading stops being a reflection of your growth and becomes just another reminder of limitation. But despair has a purpose. It strips away illusion. It breaks everything that was false. Only then, when there's nothing left to lose, you begin to see clearly again. The mind collapses. Awareness returns. Each of these 7 isn't separate. They are the same current, moving through different emotions. Control is fear. Ego is fear. Hope, greed, doubt, despair, all fear. The market doesn't test your system. It tests how much fear your consciousness can hold without breaking. And when you stop fighting it, the storm becomes stillness. There's a moment every trader meets, the silence after the storm. When charts stop looking like opportunity and start looking like mirrors. That's the collapse. The moment you realize the 7 mind killers were never enemies, they were signals. Each one pointing to the same truth you kept avoiding. You don't want control. You want peace. But peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from surrender. Control collapses when you accept uncertainty. Ego dissolves when you no longer need to be right. Hope fades when you see that truth doesn't need your permission. Fear loses power when you stop fighting it. Greed evaporates when you understand there's nothing missing. Doubt disappears when you stop looking for certainty. And despair ends when you remember why you started. You thought the market was a battlefield. It's a classroom. Every loss was a teacher. Every win was a distraction. The collapse is not punishment, it's purification. You cannot awaken without breaking. The trader who surrenders doesn't lose edge, he becomes it. You begin to see the chart differently. It's not noise anymore, it's rhythm. Not chaos, but intelligence. Awareness replaces control. Presence replaces reaction. You stop predicting. You start perceiving. There's no rush to enter. No fear to miss. No anger to lose. Just flow, clean, quiet, unforced. The market moves, and you move with it. You breathe with it. You stop trying to conquer volatility and start dancing with it. The collapse of the self is the birth of awareness. You realize now, trading was never about profit. It was about perception. Every chart was a mirror. Every loss, a reflection. Every breakthrough, a moment of stillness inside the noise. You don't control the market. You align with it. You don't win by knowing. You win by seeing. The 7 killers weren't your downfall. They were your teachers, disguised as failure. They destroyed everything that wasn't true. And what's left now, is you, aware, empty, and free enough to trade without needing to. Awareness isn't a state you reach. It's what remains when resistance ends. The trader's evolution begins in silence, the kind that feels uncomfortable at first, because it's too honest to escape from. You start noticing how automatic you've been. How much of your trading was reaction, how little was observation. You begin to see that every chart pattern is neutral. The only volatility that ever existed was emotional. And suddenly, something changes. You stop fighting with the market. You start listening to it. Not to predict, but to understand its rhythm. The breathing of price, the pause between movements, the pulse of human emotion drawn as data. This is awareness, when profit becomes secondary to presence. You no longer need a perfect entry. You no longer fear a sudden loss. You trade not because you must, but because it mirrors how deeply you see. Trading stops being a game of survival. It becomes meditation in motion. And when awareness takes over, you understand what the 7 killers were really trying to show you. Control wanted to teach surrender. Ego wanted to teach humility. Hope wanted to teach acceptance. Fear wanted to teach courage. Greed wanted to teach contentment. Doubt wanted to teach faith in uncertainty. And despair wanted to teach rebirth. Awareness integrates what resistance divided. You no longer need to destroy the killers. You only need to see them clearly. Because seeing them dissolves them. The trader who sees doesn't react, he responds. His mind moves slower. His breath steadier. His process, simple. He doesn't ask, is this the setup? He asks, am I clear? Awareness turns trading from a performance into a practice. You realize, the edge isn't knowledge. It's composure. The deeper your stillness, the clearer your decisions. The clearer your decisions, the calmer your outcomes. The market stops being an enemy. It becomes your reflection, perfect, brutal, honest. And in that reflection, you finally meet the one you were trading against all along, yourself. The market opens again. But now, it feels different. You sit in front of the same screen, the same charts, the same instruments, and yet something invisible has changed. You're not hunting anymore. You're watching. Calm. Present. Unattached. The 7 killers still whisper sometimes. Control asks for certainty. Ego wants recognition. Hope begs for rescue. Fear trembles. Greed hungers. Doubt questions. Despair waits. But now, you don't argue with them. You see them for what they are, ripples on the surface of awareness. They rise. They pass. And in that space between reaction and awareness, you find freedom. The market moves sharply, your pulse doesn't. The setup appears, you act, not out of need, but out of clarity. You exit, not to protect, but to complete. Nothing dramatic, no victory shout. Just stillness. Real mastery doesn't look powerful. It looks peaceful. You understand now, trading is a mirror for consciousness. When the mind is chaotic, the market feels hostile. When the mind is still, the same chart becomes a landscape, not a battlefield, but a reflection of balance. You don't measure success in profit anymore. You measure it in peace. The discipline you once forced is now effortless. The patience you once chased is now natural. The awareness you once sought is now who you are. Every trade becomes meditation. Every candle, a breath. And when losses come, because they always do, you see them for what they are, the cost of clarity. The mind no longer flinches. The killers no longer command. The trader has died, and in his place stands awareness, watching, waiting, free. The market doesn't destroy. It reveals. It never punished you. It purified you. And when you finally stop needing it to give you meaning, it starts giving you everything else. Real wealth isn't profit. It's the absence of panic. That's when you know, the 7 killers didn't end you. They ended who you weren't supposed to be. The market closes. Silence returns. And in that silence, you realize the truth every trader eventually learns. You were never trading the market. The market was always trading you, until you finally learned to stop